Discipline isn't about fighting the wind, it's about mastering your balance. So what does that balance actually look like? It's the ability to act decisively within uncertainty. When you know your edge, when you've defined your risk, when you've accepted that anything can happen, then you're free to execute without hesitation. That's real discipline. It's not about suppressing emotion. It's about building such a deep level of trust in your process that emotion no longer controls you. That's what I mean when I say discipline is freedom. Because when you stop trying to control the market, you free up all that energy to control yourself. And the moment you take full responsibility for your behavior in the market, everything changes. Now, here's where it gets counterintuitive. Most people believe freedom is the absence of rules. They think discipline limits their creativity, when in truth, discipline creates it. Think of a jazz musician. Within the structure of rhythm and chord progression, he can improvise endlessly. It's just, without that structure, it's just noise. Trading works the same way. Every rule you follow isn't a cage, it's a frame that gives your freedom direction. The undisciplined trader believes he's free because no one tells him what to do. The disciplined trader is free because he doesn't need anyone to tell him. After I lost everything early in my career, there was a strange kind of peace that came over me. For the first time, I had nothing left to protect, nothing left to prove. And when there's nothing to defend, there's nothing to fear. That's when I realized the market wasn't my enemy, it was just a field of probabilities waiting for me to play my edge. That was the moment discipline stopped being about effort and became about alignment. I didn't have to force myself to follow my plan anymore. It felt natural, even effortless, because I had finally accepted the one thing I'd spent years resisting: uncertainty. You see, true discipline grows in the same soil as acceptance. When you accept that anything can happen, that losses are normal, that being wrong is part of the process, that no single trade defines you, you stop reacting and start responding. You don't need to brace yourself against every tick on the screen. You can breathe, observe, and execute with clarity. That's what consistent traders do. They act within uncertainty as if it's their natural environment. They don't flinch when a trade moves against them because they already accounted for that possibility before they entered. They don't chase a win because they know another opportunity is always coming. They live in a mental space where nothing the market does can threaten who they are. When you reach that point, you'll notice something profound. The discipline you were chasing was never about self-control in the first place. It was about self-trust. You can only follow your plan consistently when you trust yourself to do it. And trust isn't built through punishment. It's built through evidence, through thousands of small actions that prove to your own mind that you'll do what you said you'd do. That's why every broken rule hurts so much, not because of the money lost, but because it shatters that evidence. Each time you act impulsively, you create doubt. Each time you follow through, you build confidence. That's how internal structure forms. It's not a checklist, it's a relationship. Every disciplined action is a promise kept to yourself. Every impulsive trade is a broken promise. You can't fake discipline because your subconscious remembers everything. It knows exactly how many times you've ignored your stop loss. It knows how many times you moved your target out of fear or greed. And it will remind you subtly every time you hesitate to pull the trigger. That hesitation isn't uncertainty about the market, it's uncertainty about yourself. So if you truly want freedom as a trader, don't seek it in the market. Seek it in your ability to act with integrity under uncertainty. Discipline is the bridge between freedom and structure, between chaos and control. It's the point where you no longer need the market to behave a certain way in order to feel at peace. When you can reach that point, discipline stops being a rule you follow and becomes the natural expression of who you are. And that brings us to a deeper question. If discipline is built from self-trust, then what keeps destroying that trust? Why do we know what to do but still can't do it consistently? The answer lives inside our psychology, the fears that quietly shape every decision we make. Because before you can build discipline, you have to disarm the emotional triggers that keep breaking it. Before you can ever master discipline, you have to understand what's constantly tearing it apart. Every trader wants to believe they can just will themselves into consistency. That if they try hard enough, if they're determined enough, they can silence fear and perform with perfect focus. But that's not how the mind works. The mind doesn't obey effort, it obeys belief. And buried inside every trader's belief system are emotional triggers so automatic, so habitual, that they take control long before logic ever enters the room. That's why you can wake up calm, promising yourself you'll follow your plan, and still find yourself clicking impulsively 10 minutes later. What's happening isn't lack of discipline, it's fear running the show. Fear of loss, fear of being wrong, fear of missing out. These three drive almost every inconsistent decision a trader makes, and until you see how they operate inside you, you'll keep mistaking emotional reactions for strategy. Let's start with the fear of loss. This one hides in plain sight. From the time we're children, we're punished for mistakes, bad grades, wrong answers, broken rules. Every system we grow up in teaches us that being wrong means pain. So by the time we reach the market, loss doesn't just mean money, it means punishment. It means we failed, that we've done something bad. That belief transforms every potential loss into a threat to our identity. So what do? We avoid it. We hold losing trades because closing them would mean accepting pain. We double down because we can't stand the idea of taking the hit. We rationalize and tell ourselves we're being patient or letting it breathe, but really we're just running from discomfort. And here's the cruel twist. The more you avoid pain, the more it costs you. A small manageable loss becomes a large devastating one. And the market forces awareness in the harshest way possible. The lesson never changes until you redefine what loss means. It will keep teaching you the same thing over and over again. So what's the cure? You have to reprogram your emotional definition of loss. A loss isn't failure, it's feedback. It's information. The only reason a loss hurts is because you're interpreting it through a belief system that says you shouldn't have lost. But when you start seeing each trade as one event in a random distribution of outcomes, the emotional charge disappears. The moment you understand that you can lose on this trade and still be profitable over the next 100, you stop needing any single trade to work out. That's how professionals think. They don't judge themselves by single outcomes, they judge themselves by process. When I accepted that, fear of loss vanished. Losing money didn't threaten me anymore because it no longer meant I'd done something wrong, it just meant the market did what it does. It expressed uncertainty. Now, let's talk about the fear of being wrong, one of the most toxic beliefs a trader can hold. Most traders unconsciously tie their self-worth to their accuracy. They believe being right validates their intelligence, their skill, their identity. So when they're wrong, they don't just lose a trade, they lose a piece of themselves. That's why so many traders refuse to cut losses. It's not the money they can't part with, it's their need to be right. Their ego convinces them that if they just hold a little longer, they'll be proven correct. They don't want to take a small loss because that would mean admitting they misread the market. And yet, every second they stay in that losing position, they're deepening the wound. I've seen traders watch an entire month's profit evaporate because they couldn't stand to be wrong for one day. You have to understand, being wrong doesn't make you a bad trader, it makes you human. The market doesn't care about your ego. It doesn't reward pride. It rewards neutrality. When you reach a point where you can execute your plan perfectly, lose money, and still feel composed, that's when you know you've detached your identity from your results. That's true freedom. I remember a trader who once told me, "I can't lose. If I lose, it means I'm stupid." He wasn't joking, and that belief destroyed him. Every trade became a test of self-worth instead of an expression of his edge. Until he learned to say, "I can execute flawlessly and still lose, and that's success," he was trapped in the endless loop of proving instead of performing. Now, there's one more fear that destroys discipline, the fear of missing out. FOMO is the silent killer of consistency because it disguises itself as opportunity. You see a move happening without you, and suddenly your heart rate jumps, your mind races, and all your planning evaporates. You tell yourself, "Just this once I'll jump in," even though you know it's not part of your plan. What's really happening is scarcity thinking. You believe this might be the last opportunity you'll get, that if you don't catch this move, you're falling behind. That's not logic, that's emotion. It's a form of desperation, and desperation and discipline can't coexist. And here's the truth. There's no such thing as the last opportunity. The market will open tomorrow, and the day after that, and the day after that. It's infinite. The problem isn't opportunity, it's your relationship to it. When you trust your process, you don't need to chase. You can watch 100 trades pass by and feel no pressure because you know your edge will appear again. The moment you stop trying to catch everything, you start catching what actually matters. That's how consistency is born, not from constant action, but from selective precision. Every trader has to go through this realization at some point. Fear, not the market, is what takes your money. The market doesn't care who you are. It's completely neutral. It gives you information, you decide what it means. And what you decide is shaped entirely by your beliefs. If your beliefs are built on fear, your discipline will always break down under pressure. That's why no amount of analysis or technical mastery can save a fearful trader. Until you confront those emotional triggers head on, you'll keep sabotaging yourself. So, I want you to ask yourself this: how much energy have you wasted fighting to be right, to avoid losses, to catch every move? And what would happen if you stopped fighting altogether? What if you stopped needing the market to validate you and started trusting that you could handle whatever comes? That's the shift that transforms discipline from an effort into a state of mind. Once you see fear for what it really is, just resistance to uncertainty, you stop reacting to it. You can still feel it, but it no longer runs you. It's like noticing a wave coming toward you instead of bracing against it. You dive through, you emerge on the other side, calm, focused, and ready for the next one. That's how you neutralize fear. You stop resisting and you start aligning. Because here's the secret: discipline doesn't crumble because you don't care enough. It crumbles because you care too much about the wrong things being right, avoiding pain, proving yourself. When you let go of that, when you truly accept the randomness of the market, discipline becomes effortless. You stop needing to be perfect, and that's when you finally start performing. And now that you understand how these fears hijack your behavior, we can finally begin rebuilding your internal foundation, not through control, but through trust. In the next section, I'll show you how to construct discipline from the inside out, how to align your beliefs with the real nature of the market so deeply that consistency stops being something you force and starts being something you are. Everything we've talked about up until now, the fear, the hesitation, the illusion of control, all of it comes back to one missing foundation. Self-trust. You can't trade with consistency without it, because every decision in the market demands that you act without knowing what's going to happen next. And that means that every trade, every click of that mouse is an act of faith, not in the market, but in yourself. This is where most traders break down. They believe discipline is about tightening up, pushing harder, forcing themselves to follow rules. But discipline doesn't live in pressure, it lives in alignment. When what you believe about the market finally matches how the market actually behaves, there's no conflict left inside you. The hesitation disappears. The need to prove yourself fades. What's left is quiet confidence, the kind that allows you to act instantly when your edge appears and just as easily walk away when it's gone. To build that kind of internal discipline, you have to start by installing what I call the 5 fundamental truths of trading. These truths aren't techniques, they're mental operating principles. They redefine your relationship with risk and uncertainty so deeply that your reactions begin to change automatically. The first is anything can happen. I don't just mean that as a motivational slogan, I mean it literally. The next tick, the next candle, the next move, it's all unknown. Once you truly accept that, you stop trying to predict and start responding. The second is you don't need to know what will happen next to make money. That idea alone changes everything. It removes the impossible burden of certainty and replaces it with probability. The third truth is there's a random distribution between wins and losses for any given set of variables that define an edge. In other words, even if your system has a 70% success rate, you have no idea which trades will make up that 70%. The fourth is an edge is nothing more than a probability of one outcome over another. It's not magic, it's math. And the fifth, every moment in the market is unique. No two setups, no two conditions, no two emotional states will ever be identical. Once you internalize these truths, your entire perception of the market changes. You stop trying to be right and you start trying to execute. Now, internalizing them isn't about memorizing them, it's about repetition until they become reflex. Think of how a casino operates. The house doesn't know the outcome of any single hand, any single spin, or any single roll of the dice, but it always plays its edge. It never hesitates, never chases, never deviates. It doesn't need to because it understands probability. The casino isn't disciplined because it has to be. It's disciplined because it is its system. That's exactly the mindset of the consistent trader. You can't force that level of discipline from the outside in. It has to grow from the inside out until every decision you make expresses your belief in those 5 truths. But here's where most traders fall short. They say they accept uncertainty, but their behavior betrays them. The moment the market moves against them, they freeze or fight. That's because deep down, their beliefs still expect the market to behave logically or fairly or predictably, and when it doesn't, they feel betrayed. The only way to fix that is to align your beliefs with reality. The market doesn't owe you anything. It doesn't reward effort or fairness or need. It simply moves according to collective behavior. If your beliefs don't match that reality, you'll keep feeling emotional pain every time the market surprises you. But once your beliefs line up, the emotional friction disappears. You can see a trade go against you and feel nothing but curiosity. You can take a loss and feel gratitude for the feedback. You can miss a move and still feel whole. That's when you know your internal environment matches the external one. It's like tuning an instrument. When the strings are out of tune, every note sounds wrong. You can play the right song, the right chords, but it still grates against your ear. The same is true for trading. If your beliefs are out of tune with reality, every market move feels dissonant. You'll keep trying to fix the song instead of tuning the instrument. Alignment is tuning. It's the process of removing the distortion between what you want to be true and what actually is. And the more you tune, the more harmonious your actions become. Now, let's talk about how to train this state into your nervous system. Because understanding these ideas isn't enough, you have to live them. This is where my 20 trade exercise comes in. It's deceptively simple. Take 20 trades in a row, exactly by your plan, without changing a single parameter. Your goal isn't to make money. Your goal is to prove to yourself that you can follow your plan flawlessly regardless of outcome. It sounds easy until you try it. By the 5th trade, your mind will start whispering, maybe I should skip this one. This setup doesn't look perfect. Maybe I should double size. That's your emotional conditioning fighting for control. Every time you override those impulses and execute anyway, you're rewiring your brain. You're teaching it that execution, not outcome, is the source of safety. And once your brain associates safety with discipline instead of control, trading becomes a completely different experience. When you complete that exercise, 20 trades, full integrity, no interference, something shifts permanently. You realize you don't need certainty to act. You don't need to feel confident before you execute. You just need to trust the process. That's when fear starts to fade. Not because it vanishes, but because it loses authority. It's still there, but it no longer dictates your behavior. You might feel the flutter of anxiety when a trade moves against you, but it doesn't trigger panic. You might feel temptation after a win, but it doesn't lead to recklessness. The emotions still exist, but they're background noise now, not commands. And that's the turning point where discipline becomes who you are instead of something you're trying to maintain. It's not about motivation or effort anymore. It's about identity. You start to see yourself as a disciplined trader, someone who follows process, manages risk, and respects randomness. Every action reinforces that identity, and the stronger that identity becomes, the easier discipline feels. You no longer have to remind yourself to be consistent, you just are. When you reach that level, trading becomes astonishingly simple. You look at a setup, define the risk, take the trade, and move on. There's no noise, no struggle, no inner debate. You trust your edge because you trust yourself. And that self-trust gives you the emotional freedom most traders spend their entire careers chasing. That's why I say discipline is the bridge between freedom and control. It's the state where uncertainty loses its power to scare you. You've accepted it, built structure around it, and learned to move within it like water finding its level. So now that we've built that internal structure, the beliefs, the alignment, the repetition, the next step is to bring it into daily practice. Because discipline isn't a concept you visit once in a while, it's a routine you live every day. It's the way you begin your morning, the way you act during the trade, the way you process each outcome at the end of the day. It's not something you think about, it's something you do automatically. In the next section, we'll turn this mental architecture into a tangible framework, a daily rhythm that reinforces your identity as a disciplined trader and keeps you anchored no matter what the market throws your way. By this point, you've begun to see that discipline isn't built in a single moment of strength. It's cultivated through repetition. It's a habit of thinking and acting that becomes so ingrained it stops feeling like effort. But that transformation doesn't happen in theory. It happens in the quiet, ordinary routines that shape how you approach each day in the market. A disciplined trader doesn't wake up hoping to feel confident. He wakes up knowing that his structure will guide him, regardless of how he feels. That's what this daily framework is about, creating a rhythm so solid that it keeps you centered even when the market is chaotic, unpredictable, or emotionally charged. Because if you wait to feel disciplined, you never will. The key is to behave your way into the mindset you want. Every day starts long before the market opens. What you do in those early hours sets the tone for everything that follows. When I sit down in the morning, before I even look at a chart, I ask myself one question: what state of mind am I bringing into the market today? Most traders never ask that. They jump straight into analysis, reacting to price movements, headlines, and noise, and by the time they realize they're emotional, it's already too late. But awareness is half the battle. If I notice I'm tense, distracted, or impatient, I don't ignore it. I address it before I trade. Sometimes that means taking a short walk, breathing deeply, clearing the mental clutter. My goal isn't to feel good, it's to be neutral. Because neutrality is the foundation of consistency. If you start your trading day from neutrality, the market can't easily pull you into extremes. The next part of the morning ritual is reflection.
Stop, Phil.
I review the previous day, not the profit or loss, but the process. Did I follow my plan? Did I respect my stops? Did I react emotionally or stay aligned with my structure? This reflection is how I reinforce the right identity. If I see I made an emotional decision, I don't judge myself, I document it. I write it down so I can see patterns. Over time, those notes reveal exactly where my discipline weakens certain setups, certain time frames, certain emotional triggers. Once you know your weak spots, you stop being controlled by them. You can anticipate them, prepare for them, and neutralize them before they pull you off balance. After reflection comes preparation. I set my risk parameters for the day, not as a restriction, but as permission. I decide how much I'm willing to lose before I stop trading. I set alerts, check my key levels, and outline potential opportunities. This step gives me clarity before chaos begins. It's like an athlete's warm-up. It doesn't just prepare the body, it primes the mind. I visualize myself executing perfectly, not because I expect to win, but because I expect to act in alignment with my plan. This visualization creates familiarity, and familiarity calms the nervous system. The brain stops seeing the market as a threat and starts recognizing it as a familiar environment. That's how you begin the day with presence and control. Once the market opens, everything shifts. The noise increases, the stakes feel higher, and emotion tries to take the wheel. This is where most traders lose themselves. But the disciplined trader doesn't fight the noise, he tunes it out by focusing on what he can control. When I'm in a trade, my awareness stays on myself, not the market. I'm monitoring my breathing, my posture, my tension. If I feel my body tightening, that's a signal not from the market, but from my subconscious. It's telling me I'm attached to the outcome. That's my cue to step back, breathe, and recenter. The market doesn't need my tension, it needs my clarity. My only job during the trade is to execute. The outcome is none of my business. During those moments, I remind myself, I am the constant.